help with our relationship and our own mental
Our
state.
therapist always joins us at just the right time.
Fortunately, she's here. According to the Pew Research Center, 52% of millennials, did you know this, live in their parents' home.
That's a lot.
I can't believe that.
That's a lot.
The previous high was 48%. That was set back in 1940. At the end of the Great Depression.
I get it then. College kids, they're coming home soon as well, or with distance learning, maybe they never left this semester. So how do you navigate adult children living at home with you? You get some help from Dr. Karin Ryan from Nystrom and Associates joining us via Skype. Dr. Ryan, when you hear Elizabeth and I scuffling or having a little bit of
It wasn't an argument, kids. It was a discussion.
We were discussing. How would you grade the state of our relationship before we get into kids being at home?
I think listening to one another is really important, and giving space for different beliefs and wants and needs is important. So honoring that you have different ideas about the benefits of being an arborist.
Thank you, Dr.
She is
Ryan.
good. She is wonderful. Good. Okay, so it's all about communication, whether it's a relationship with your spouse, with your co-host, with your kids who are coming home. Let's talk about that dynamic. I remember coming home from college, Dr. Nystrom, and here's what I thought. I thought, Tom and Suze, I can do whatever I want.
Oh, and?
Guess what, Dr. Ryan? They said not under our roof. And so there was a little bit of friction there. What's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you think about it, when you're living at home, there's certain dynamics to get used to. And then somebody goes away to college, or they're away for a couple of years, and when you come back, you kind of expect it to be the norm. Or sometimes you expect it to be totally different, but oftentimes those two parties have no idea what the other one's expecting, and then that's when we really see that conflict, when there's a difference of opinions and expectations of how that's going to go.
So what's a healthy way then to go about establishing new norms, since it's not like you're magically transporting back to your childhood when you return to your house?
Yeah. I think the first step is acknowledging to yourself that it's going to be different, and knowing that that's not a bad thing. It's not that there's anything wrong. It's going to be different, and therefore we need to proactively sit down and talk about, what is it going to look like? What are my expectations? What are your expectations? And how do we meet in the middle? How are we going to learn to live together again?
So you're talking specifics, like, here's what I think, and let's just be honest. I mean, if you're at college and you have like a boyfriend or a girlfriend, there are things that are probably happening in the place where you reside that probably will not be happening at your parents' house. But that's like legit. You got to iron that stuff out.
You do. You're spot on. And it's really talking those details out. So are you going to come home at night? And if you don't come home at night, when are you going to call and let us know? Right? Because that, you can't take the worry out of the parent. You can't take the care out of the parent. They're still going to want to make sure you're okay. And to give you the child that autonomy, then you got to check in and tell them. Right? Other specifics to work through. Who's going to be in charge of what chores? Are we going to have dinner together still? Right? We used to have family. Do we do that now? Are there certain days of the week we want to do that? Some families will break up, like who's responsible for what meal? Who's doing the laundry? Who's in charge of picking up certain things?
Who's tucking who in at this point?
I know, that's a good question.
How are we caring
So
for
when
each
do
other?
you think this conversation needs to happen? Like as soon as the kid arrives home, or do you want it to be happening now?
I think there's no harm in starting it now. I think it's helpful to be in person and really talk it through and explore, but there's absolutely no harm in starting that conversation and just saying, hey, I'm preparing for when you're coming home and thinking about this. What are your thoughts? And so having some of that proactive conversation, so that way it's not we're sitting down and having this really big conversation, might serve you well. Because it's part of the conversation, and then that serves you well to check in later and say, how are things going? How are these norms working for us?
I think that's good advice too, to do it early rather than later, because there's emotion that happens for the kids of coming home too, of like a little bit of grief of their independence and missing their friends.
Yeah, it's a weird social, personal dynamic for all the folks that are involved. Dr. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
Always really good stuff. Nystrom and Associates provides care in the fields of psychiatry, psychology, family therapy, and more. They've got 20 locations in the Twin Cities.
They work with couples, families, and individuals of all ages. And if you're struggling with stress, anxiety, depression, or addiction, number one, you're not alone. And number two, reach out to them today. Okay, still to come.